Review of regulation HC-R, scope of meet and confer, methods and procedures. So last time we looked at our current meet and confer policy, and the board had requested that we work off of Glendale Elementary's meet and confer policy in regulations in order to make changes to ours. So the draft regulation for Creighton and the regulation in place in Glendale are both attached. There's not a presentation of this, correct? I have lots of thoughts on this. So I don't know if you guys want to read it first or if anyone else wants to start. So, to me, the meet and confer process is really a way to provide to help us make a more informed decision here from the governing board level. And so, I know there were a lot of concerns about the meet and confer process last year, which is why I brought this to the board. And the actual Glendale policy is even worse than what ours is now, because it's more restrictive and it changes the number of people to 14 involved in the process. So I honestly don't think it's helpful to move from Glendale policy to start working on that.
Well, and Glendale is a unified district, right? So they have what is it Glendale?
It's a Glendale Elementary.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
To me, it's too specific.
In terms of the parameters or
The number of people, the types of people, the number of people. Because our current policy, I don't know, this policy reduces the influence and voice of teachers and staff even more. The people that are appointed by the superintendent, who do they represent? Who are they consulting with? Who are they representing?
You mean the teachers at large?
Correct. That's one concern I have.
Well, I mean, I guess that's making the assumption that the teachers at large aren't also members of CEA. Right, I mean,
Correct.
so this says that there are obviously 3 that are going to be selected by CEA. There are 3 additional teachers that may or may not be members of CEA, but it's not specific. So I don't see it as limiting the voice of teachers. I think the intent was to broaden it so that we did hear, if I remember correctly, I think it was Jeannie, you had brought up the idea of maybe having more than just CEA membership at the table for meet and confer. So that's what that second group of teachers at large was intended to do, right?
Right, and let me just be clear, so this one right here, the HCR, this one where it says Creighton, this is not currently what our meet.
The one that says draft that you're looking at? To have a watermark for draft?
Across it.
Oh, the watermark.
What time is it? I have to be up really early. Okay, yes, I'm sorry.
So this is draft.
Past my bedtime, okay. And so, so who drafted this exactly?
Oh, and I'm sorry, to go back to we have a request to address the board. So does James, do you want to speak now, or do you want to address the board later?
I can speak now if you want.
Okay. Do you mind putting your thoughts on hold, or do you?
Oh, no, that's fine.
I'm sorry about that. Can you please state your name and address, and you have Do you have a 5 minute? You have a 5 minute limit on the agenda item, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
James Diaz, President of CEA. I was asked to provide a perspective because CEA is part of the meeting team, just to provide some background information from our perspective. So this is our perspective, so take it for what it is. We had an opportunity to look at the document that we have out there, the draft, and we feel that the document that's there is a lot more. It's a step in the wrong direction, in our opinion. We're not against the idea of stakeholders. We will talk to anybody. We will go through and communicate with anybody, even people that hate us. We'll definitely go through and talk to them. We're not against the idea of parents being on Meet and Confer. We do, our suggestion is that however you decide stakeholders, that they are looked at through the lens of who it is that they are able to go through and report back to. It's been our experience in the past that people that are members, at-large members, have, if they don't have a constituency to report back to, or if they don't have someone that they're held accountable for, like we are, that sometimes you get a person that is only accountable for themselves. When you have a district perspective, like CEA has, where we have members from all different employee groups, it's very important to us to report out to as many people as we possibly can, because the whole idea is communication. I know in the past, when new governing board members have come on, there was a process that was followed in which you had the superintendent and the CEA president that was looking for a parent to be on that committee as well too. And those people decided, I think it was Jason and Dr. Boyle, decided we're going through and figuring out who those members were. And I know with guidance from the governing board as well too. I think it's important that when you're going through and making decisions about stuff like that, that that you have an idea about like what is it that these stakeholders are representing. So I definitely don't want to give the impression that we're not against stakeholders, we're not against parents. I just think it's important for you to take those things into consideration. Another aspect to take into consideration is communication throughout and at the end. It's very important that when, in our opinion, it's very important when agreements are made and agreements are taken into consideration, that everybody has equal access to them. If they're posted on the CSU website, or if they're posted someplace where people can go through and actually see them and have and be able to look at them and see for themselves, that empowers the people to be able to go through and make sure that they're honoring the agreements everywhere from the administration on down. And also in terms of communication, we're limited by how we can communicate with people and how we can talk to people. We've found some creative ways to go through and work around those things. But it would be nice within Meet and Confer if we're stakeholders that are accountable to all people, that we have the opportunity to communicate with them as well. And then the second part here is we had a lawyer look at the Meet and Confer process and to go through and figure out, and the question was, can a school district's governing board direct a district's administration to engage in the Meet and Confer process for matters beyond salary and benefits, such as working conditions? And the brief answer is yes. And I don't have a copy for everybody, but I do have two. Maybe other copy or something. So it's just the legal response from AEA's perspective, and about and like most lawyers, you have one lawyer says one thing, one lawyer says another. But basically, the idea is that according to our lawyer, that it is not stated anywhere legally that you cannot include working conditions. The final thing is we had a member of the governing board from Glendale Elementary that reached out to us and talked to us about their experience as a board member. And one of the things that they told us when they were talking to us about it is they were saying, if you're concerned about, I want to make sure that I get this right because I don't want to mess this up. Oh, sorry.
I'm edge of my seat. Can you finish this sentence?
If, so just Hilda, to make sure that we're following what we're supposed to, if board members want to continue to get information from someone who has done a request to address the board, we can do that, is that correct?
Well, actually, it's like if he has questions and he can ask you guys, but there is kind of a 5-minute limit, but I mean, he can definitely finish the sentence. I mean, so.
Go ahead, James.
The board member said that if you are concerned about staff retention, you really need to consider working conditions as a part of your main member policy. And there's other things as well.
I think that's it. Thank you, Mr. Diaz. So,
I guess the question I have then is, keeping in mind the idea that these teachers at large may not necessarily have a broader constituent base, where the assumption is that the one principal is going back and talking to principals, the one assistant principal is going back and talking to assistant principals, district administration, and so on. Is there a population of teachers who are, based on their position in the district, slightly different than a classroom teacher or an administrator? And I'm sort of thinking of, like, we call them in Scottsdale teachers on assignment. So like our achievement teachers and so on. They fall under the teacher agreement, obviously, or the meet and confer process, but they're not a classroom teacher. But they clearly could, theoretically, to Mr. Diaz's point, represent a group of stakeholders that they could elicit feedback from as well, that may have a different perspective than individual classroom teachers. So it could, instead of just teachers at large, would we maybe want to consider thinking about, and I don't know if 3 is the right number, but a number of, that group.
I mean, in theory, that's a good idea, but reality in this district has been that those folks are seen as an extension of the administration. So not necessarily, I think that's further making it an us versus them, and lopsided in negotiations.
Okay.
I have a question about the CEA. Maybe James has the answer. What percentage of, well, I know we just, not counting the new teachers that just came, because you don't know probably yet, but what percentage of the teachers in the district are in CEA? More or less, probably as of, I don't know, do you already have the count with the new teachers? Or not?
We're very protective of people's, because there are some cases of retribution and stuff when people feel like that they're identified as a CEA member, to go through and talk about that stuff. So
I don't want
we're kind of hesitant to go through and talk about it. I can tell you that we have members from all levels of the district, with from administration all the way down to classified staff. So there definitely is a wide
Oh, there's
range.
classified staff
of-
in CEA?
Yeah, we're a wall-to-wall organization, so we're open to all people. And in addition, we make a very concerted effort to go and reach out to anybody, whether they are a member or not.
I understood your question. I thought you said, what is the percentage of classroom teachers who are in CEA? Was that what you were asking? Okay. Can you tell us, without saying anybody's names?
I don't
Or you don't
really
have-
have that
or you
information
don't
right
have-
now. I can
More
look at it
or less,
later.
And then it says here for support staff, does that mean classified?
Yeah, classified staff to support staff, custodians.
So they're may or may not be in CEA.
They may or may not be in CA, correct. Yeah. But like I said, we will talk to anybody, and we look for the opportunity to reach out to as many people as possible.
I think there's some broader philosophical issues about meet and confer that we have touched on, but like I know, so our attorney had said that she thinks we need to stick to just talking about a very specific or a very narrow,
Salaries and benefits.
thank you, salary and benefits. But the ADA lawyer has said differently, and that's the exact point that I brought up in the last meeting. I didn't agree with what our attorney had said. There are other examples of districts that do go beyond salary and benefits, and some examples are Kyrene, Paradise Valley, Amphitheater, Cartwright, Glendale Union, Higley, Phoenix Elementary, Phoenix Union, Pinion, Scottsdale, Tucson Unified. And so those are districts that address a lot of different types of working conditions, like class size, etc. So to me, I think that is within the scope, and I'd like to see that our scope of meet and confer is expanded, which is what I've been saying all along. I don't know how other people think about that.
I agree.
I'm actually kind of looking right now to see if, on this board bulletin, if we can see actually what the teacher turnover rate is for these districts, if they're mentioned in here. I know we weren't able to get a hold of all of them. So that would be kind of an interesting thing to look at. And unfortunately, I see Paradise Valley.
I've lost my board bulletin.
I don't really see, it's probably
All
underneath
these
all of my
papers.
stuff, I'm sorry.
100 and under, so it is, yeah.
So yeah, unfortunately, it looks like the only one that really is on there is Paradise Valley. I mean, they have an incredibly low turnover rate, comparatively speaking, to these other, as a matter of, Lake Havasu is less than that, so.
Well, they're the same as Levine.
So, I mean, that would actually be maybe some information that we could get. I know it's not always easy to get that information from schools to find out what their turnover rate is. I do know that the Arizona Republic published something a few years ago, so it's like 2 or 3 years old, with maybe twice as many schools as what we have in our board bulletin. But that would be very
Right.
interesting to see what their meet and confer looks like, what's included on their meet and confer, and their retention rate, because, I mean,
I could get it for Alejandra, the French is a board member for Alejandra, and she said she could go.
wow.
And I think the big distinction, though, is the difference between districts like ours, which are elementary districts, versus unified districts, and then districts that have, in addition to our meet and confer process, a whole professional agreement that is.
Correct.
So the other things outside of the scope of salary and benefits get negotiated in the professional agreement versus just obviously the basics of meet and confer. You know, that is opening up a whole other host of creating 100-page
Yeah.
agreements and documents and adding an extensive amount of time to the meet and confer process, which I can tell you doesn't get done in 3 months as our current process does. And you can't negotiate all of those things with all of those people at the table and create a professional agreement that addresses each of those. So I think the guidance from legal counsel is this is what's clearly able to be discussed in meet and confer. And obviously other folks have gone either against their counsel's wishes or, their counsel didn't advise them not to enter into those other discussions. But my worry is it's sort of a slippery slope. Once you start going beyond the things that we're able to go beyond, you can't say no to another topic that somebody wants to add to the table as long as they can put it under the parameter of working conditions. And I think, people could make arguments for lots of things being under the parameters of working conditions. So then you get into this issue of being arbitrary around what it is that you will allow people to talk about and make confirm what you won't allow them to talk about. So, I mean, I think it's certainly worth the conversation, but it's gonna obviously be a longer one. This is just an information item for tonight, right?
Correct.
So, I mean, it's mostly just to kind of take a look at it. I mean, I think that this is a pretty small enough group of folks that are meeting and conferring. And, obviously if we kept everything else equal, then I would think we'd want to, if we weren't gonna have teachers at large potentially on because they don't represent a stakeholder group. I'm not entirely sure that can't be remedied either, but then we'd want to balance out the number of teachers from CEA because we have in essence 4 administrators, 4 support staff, and then 3 teachers, which isn't balanced. Right, so we'd want to make those numbers work out. Alternatively, because the process has to be determined by the superintendent for support staff, we could maybe consider the idea of asking CEA, maybe giving them a few more teachers, but asking that, one be a non-CEA member that they bring into the table or something like that to get to your point of being more inclusive and go beyond just the scope of CEA membership.
Yeah, and I say that, I've always, for my first year of teaching, I've always been a member, a dues paying member of my professional organization, but I know a lot of really great teachers who, for whatever reason, whether it's financial, they, don't see the value in it, unfortunately, or, there are many different reasons. They haven't been convinced yet or whatever, but they're still good teachers and they still bring something to the table and they still participate in meetings and things like that. So I do believe that there is value in those teachers who aren't dues paying members of their professional organization. And maybe even perhaps bringing them to the not like we're trying, that's the goal of Meet and Confer, but then they can see the value of their collective efforts as teachers and that organization that allows them a seat at the table. And that's really, I guess, what I want more than anything else is that teachers feel like they have a seat at the table.
And a lot of the feedback we received from last year's Meet and Confer was that it didn't feel like a collaborative process and that it was more of a us versus them. And so that's a really big concern of mine. I don't want people to feel that way. And I think we need to make a significant change to the way we do things because 3 days is not enough to even talk about salaries and benefits alone.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, but I have to say I don't think any district has, I'm just horribly generalizing, but I think that you could talk to any school district and ask them about their Meet and Confer process, and somebody would say that it's enough us versus them, no matter what their process is, whether they have a bigger agreement and a professional, agreement that stipulates everything, or a simple Meet and Confer process. I mean, in every school district that I've ever worked with, and the one that I worked in for a long time, and everybody is a fabulous person as an individual, but when you get into the room and you're negotiating these things, it can seem not collaborative and somewhat contentious, and I don't think anybody intends it to be that way, but these are important, sometimes life-changing decisions that are being made in those conversations, and so there's a lot at stake for the people that are in the room.
I have a suggestion for the last one. Seeing that some of the support staff are part of CEA, why don't we divide that up? Because it looks like the superintendent is selecting a lot of the people here, which seems kind of one-sided. She's selecting 3 teachers and then 4 support staff. So that's 7 people that are in the process are kind of selected, or the process is determined by the superintendent. But maybe in the very end, 2 of the support staff can be selected by CEA and 2 by the process determined by the superintendent. I think that might make it a little bit more fair. That's just my thought about that. And then maybe I heard Mr. Diaz's concerns about the 3 teachers at large, that sometimes some of them are just, don't really understand the whole picture and are just, thinking about themselves. So I'm wondering if there's a way to remedy that a little bit.
But wouldn't that also apply to the 4 support staff? I mean, in theory, right? So if I have 4 support staff that are just out there.
Everybody's in
Working.
transportation.
They're
Well, that's what I'm
Only
saying,
about
but
transportation issues.
two
We got-
selected from CAA and then 2 how it is, you
Mhm.
know. But you're right, maybe.
So since this isn't something that's calling for a motion, what is, I understand it's for discussion information, so what are the next steps to this?
Can I ask just a clarifying question? Because I'm not sure I understand the intent of something that's in the timeline. And I'm not sure if I'm reading it incorrectly. So the first sentence that says commence annually in February during non-school business hours. What do we mean by non-school business hours? Do we mean on Saturdays and after, like, close?
Well, it used
Right, because it used to be during
done
the day, and we talked about how we wanted to make sure that people had access to the process. And if I was a teacher and I wanted to attend meet and confer, even just as a public meeting, I couldn't because I wouldn't be able to get a sub for my classroom, whereas members of the meet and confer team do. So I think that was the goal of changing it, but I don't know what non-school business hours means. To me, that is weekends, because, right, and I know maybe late nights, but is that really the intention, or is this?
Well, the intention was to reflect the law where, not doing this during, because of the membership and not doing it during school contract hours. But also not committing Saturdays because it's a long process and it's an involved process. So with non-school business hours possibly being after school, once the children leave, and there might be some Wednesdays where there's some early release time, but there's lots of professional development going on. And the principals will let you know, as the teachers, will let you know that almost every Wednesday is taken with either site initiatives or district initiatives. So it would have to be, either after school, so 3:30 is typically when kids start and go into the evening, or on a Saturday.
So if that was non-contracted time, maybe, as opposed to
It's so difficult because,
depending on their contracts.
and because of.
One
the
administrators are are exempt and all that.
meetings, and teachers are.
Yes, you're right.
So,
That piece is just a little tricky to, what that conjures up makes it a little,
Because then you have the support staff who get paid hourly and they're just not getting paid for that.
well, in essence, nobody is. That's the point. No one's allowed to get paid to do bargaining for their contract. Thank you, Susan.
You're welcome.
Alrighty.
Well, to go back to, I just want to summarize my thoughts on this issue. I really do support expanding the scope of meet and confer, because right now, if we can put together a policy and create a process in this district where people really feel like it is collaborative and they're able to address multiple issues in the workplace, we'll be be better informed. There'll be more thoughtful discussions that are occurring in that meet and confer process, and I think we'll be able to put together, more supportive policies from our perspective, and that's the reason why I really think that we need to look at this. So I thank you guys for entertaining my agenda item. Are there any other comments or questions?
So in terms of a timeline, I think that was kind of Jamie's point. When would we, what would be sort of the ideal time to bring this back for an action item?
I like it would have to be before January. We
Oh,
usually
yeah.
start in,
Yeah.
February, but who drafts, is it a collaborative effort again, like trying to figure out what would be, or is it just something that's presented
Or make
based on?
recommendations and send our edits to administration. Susan,
Right.
do we send it to you maybe?
Sure.
Like if we had feedback, we could just send feedback and then come up with the version. The other thing that would be helpful in future drafts is to track changes, because I honestly don't know can't remember what our current policy looks like, so I'm like, are we adding 4 support staff? Do we have them in our other one? I know that the 3 teachers at large were new.
You want me to turn on your microphone? I turned it off when I was up there. Oh.
Oh, so to answer your question, this is a regulation to support the policy. Currently, we have no regulation in place. Our policy HC says that the scope of meet and confer includes wages, salary, benefits, and conditions in work that are non-instructional in nature.
So that would be what the R next to HC stands for, as a regulation.
But we currently don't have a regulation, and so therefore, when the board requested,
Okay, so this is a real draft, so if we send changes, recommended changes, suggestions, things we're thinking about, whatever.
But I think we also need more information about just generally meet and confer, not just looking at one policy, because we don't have context around what Glendale L does. We don't know about other policies they have that address working conditions and how those are developed, and I just think we need more information, and I'm happy to try to help compile some of that and provide it to board members. I just think this is an important issue, and there's a lot more to it than we've been able to touch on today. Anything else? All right. Second to last item under, okay, general discussion of the Arizona School Boards Association political agenda and a